One of the problems I keep encountering is that it seems like every time I open my mouth, I have to give this endless stream of caveats to explain upon explain upon explain, and it always comes to claims versus opinions, or objectivism versus subjectivism, let alone the whole religion versus atheism thing, or the anarchy thing. And sometimes I think back to my past when I was a teenager and when I went through all the different religions. So I think once you spot the bullshit in a religion and you look towards another religion, it's easier to spot the bullshit the second time. And as you keep going, eventually, at least for me, that was the thing, was to find the flaw in all the religions. That's one of the things that brought me to atheism. I continually find myself in this full circle position where you have the sheeple who have this blanket concept of almost everything that's told to them without thinking. Then you have people who start to doubt, people who are becoming skeptic. Their minds are starting to open. And whether it's religiously or politically or whatever, there are different levels of conception. When you look at any subject, any of the sciences, any of the arts, any subject, we'll say macrame. Now, fuck macrame. We'll go with needlepoint. Now, how much does the average person know about needlepoint? You got a needle, you got some different colored threads, you make little designs on a thing, whatever. But if you actually did needlepoint, you would know a whole lot more things. You probably know different ways to move the needle and tie different knots and do different patterns in design. And certainly if you spent years at it, you would learn a whole bunch of different things, maybe almost everything there could be known about needlepoint. Then, when you take it to another level, you could learn about the history of needlepoint. You could learn about what the chemical content and the fibers are in the thread. The point is you can take anything, any subject, ballpoint pens, and you can take it to a level of appreciation that is not just beyond the obvious, but levels and levels and levels beyond the obvious. Ultimately, to physics. Everything ultimately breaks down into atoms and subatomic particles. Everything in the universe is matter or energy. So you find this group of people waking up, and they are a little bit more enlightened than the rest of the group. When people start to wake up out of the sheep mentality, and they start to explore new horizons of consciousness, and then there are others who take it a little further and become a little more enlightened because maybe they get some knowledge in them. Then you have some other people who are a little more enlightened because they have some life experience in them. Then you have some other people who might be a little more enlightened because they do tons of research. Maybe they become an expert in something, or maybe they're like me, they're a philosopher, they want to know everything about everything. Now, I'm not saying I know everything about everything, but I make it my business to know the bounds of human knowledge, at least as far as the sciences go. Now, certainly there are many people who know lots more about physics and biology and chemistry and geology and all of the sciences than I do, because I am not a physicist or a biologist or any of those other things. I am a philosopher. And I feel that it's my place to look at what all these different fields have to offer and paint the big picture of reality. And I think any philosopher, that's what they feel that their job should be, to have a clear picture of reality. I think most philosophies have the goal of happiness. I think one of the things that appealed to me about skepticism was, instead of the end being happiness, the end was truth, to look for the truth in all things. And to keep questioning and questioning, because if there was ever any truth to be found about anything, there would be many more questions to pile onto that truth. Any subject you pick, there's a basic level of understanding, and then there's levels upon levels upon levels of understanding and appreciation in any category that you pick. I think it's a crime that they don't teach appreciation in the elementary schools. If I wouldn't have had appreciation classes in college, so much of the world would have just passed me by. All of Western history, architecture, art, music, things that, I talk to young people today all the time. A lot of them don't even know who John, Paul, George, and Ringo is. These people should be slapped. These are like the greatest artists of the last century. Let alone Bach or Mozart or Beethoven. Maybe they saw Amadeus. And I'm not just trying to get on the young people because, the old people have their big missing chunks of information too. If children were taught appreciation in general, and learn how to apply appreciation to all the different subjects that they're going to encounter in their lifetime, and we're taught how all these different subjects were actually put together, a high school graduate would actually be such a better person, would be such a benefit to society. There are just so many things that they don't teach you in school. I got on the quest for enlightenment when I was really young, and I remember learning about Jesus, and not just from my religion's perspective, from a bunch of religion perspectives. I'm learning about Buddha and the Vedas and all the different religions. And what I have found that was consistent with all the leaders, except Jesus, is that they talk about enlightenment, different levels of enlightenment. They might not always use the word enlightenment. I think a lot of times that's more in association with Buddhism and Hinduism. I'm talking about things like karma and yin and yang and Zen. And then in the West, enlightenment kind of followed evolution and the scientific method and actually acquiring knowledge. So I kind of grew up with the understanding of both of these things, Eastern enlightenment and Western enlightenment. And all these spiritual masters would talk about transcendence and enlightenment. And I feel that I have transcended several times in my life. And I look forward to more transcendence. I think that the first step of wisdom, the first step of real wisdom, is understanding how little you know and how little you'll ever know. And you might as well come to terms with that. A lot of times I'll get in arguments with people who obviously have displayed that they don't know as much about many subjects as I do, yet I'm still supposed to respect them as some kind of expert. And then a lot of times they'll start calling me stupid or telling me that I don't like to admit that I'm wrong. I can admit when I'm wrong, and I've admitted I'm wrong to the public exactly like this. So I certainly don't have a problem admitting I'm wrong, but I'm not going to admit I'm wrong when I know I'm not. And to do so, I think, would be morally corrupt. So in these various religions, the transcendence is usually referred to as a spiritual transcendence. To go from a normal person and somehow transcend into a spiritual being of a more enlightened state. Well, I think that's possible. And I think they were on to something. The only thing is that I don't believe that we have spirits. I believe that we are electrochemical responses in our brain inside a carbon-based life-form body. And I think all evidence will support that. So if we're self-contained, individual, unique organisms, how are we supposed to achieve some kind of transcendence? Well, I think unlocking certain pathways, or maybe even forming certain neurological pathways in your brain with correct and quality information, will transcend a human being into a more intellectual, enlightened human being. And I don't think that there's one moment where everything just clicks. I think that there's a whole bunch of little clicks and some gray areas and some doubts and some curiosity, and it builds up after a while, and eventually you start to ask the big questions. And when you find that there are some answers to the big questions, and some of those answers are, I don't know, and I might never know, you have to come to terms with what truth and reality and how they relate to each other really are. A lot of us have made big issues with religion and politics because certainly those are the big ones and are giant influences in our everyday life and all of our communities. I think that there has to be some correlation between meaning and transcendence. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of big, why is the universe here, or why do people exist meaning. I'm talking about meaning that means something to you as an individual. Meaning that is so strong that your whole being is behind that meaning. And even if you don't know what that meaning is yet, or what that driving force, that one thing, it's there to be found. I think some people who do find some meaning, they get so driven into their meaning. And a lot of times that's okay if it's, a good positive thing, but sometimes they try to suck you into it or drag you into it. You need to know about your path and where you need to go, while at the same time not constantly lingering on planning. If you achieve a certain level of Zen, everything has a flow around it. And if you plan for things, you start to find that there's always a deviation from the plan, good or bad. It just always happens. So in a big sense, why even plan anything? Because nothing really goes as planned. Others will say, fail to plan, plan to fail. But how can you fail if you have no plan?